Catherine Walsh moved through the hotel corridor with practiced efficiency, her housekeeping cart clicking softly against the plush carpet. At 42 years old, she had learned to find dignity in work that others might consider beneath them. Room 1847 was next on her list, a premium suite on the executive floor where she rarely worked. But today they were short-staffed and everyone was covering extra rooms. She knocked twice, announced herself clearly, and entered when no one responded. The suite was immaculate, barely touched, suggesting a guest who had checked in late and left early. Catherine worked methodically, fresh linens, bathroom cleaning, dusting, vacuuming. She had developed a rhythm over the past 7 years, a meditation movement that kept her mind from wandering to places that still hurt. As she lifted the decorative pillows from the couch, something fell to the floor with a heavy thud, a thick envelope unmarked. Catherine picked it up and felt the weight of it immediately, the unmistakable heft of cash in quantity. She opened it carefully, her breath catching when she saw the contents. Stacks of $100 bills neatly bundled. She didn't count them, but experience told her this was at least $10,000, possibly more. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the envelope. For several long seconds, Catherine stood frozen in that luxury suite, the money heavy in her hands and heavier in her implications. $10,000. That was nearly 6 months of her salary. That was the surgery her mother kept postponing because insurance wouldn't cover it. That was her daughter's college fund that had been depleted during the years when Catherine couldn't work. That was security, breathing room, a chance to stop struggling for just a moment. No one would know. The guests might not even remember leaving it here, might assume they'd lost it elsewhere. She could slip it into her cart, take it home, and finally, have something good happen after years of fighting just to stay afloat. But even as the thought formed, Catherine knew she couldn't do it. Not because she was particularly noble or because she expected a reward. She couldn't do it because somewhere inside her, beneath the years of hardship and humiliation, remained the person she had been before everything fell apart. The person who understood that character wasn't measured in moments of comfort, but in moments of choice. Catherine placed the envelope carefully on the nightstand, finished cleaning the room, and immediately reported the finding to her supervisor. What Catherine didn't know was that the guest in room 1847 was Richard Blackwood, founder and CEO of Meridian Hotel Group, one of the fastest-growing luxury hotel chains in North America. And the money had been left accidentally. Richard Blackwood had built his empire on a simple philosophy. Character revealed itself in how people behaved when they thought no one was watching. Over the years, he had developed an unconventional method of evaluating the properties in his expanding portfolio. He would check in anonymously at each hotel, observe operations for a day or two, and then conduct what he privately called integrity tests. The cash in the envelope was one such test. He had been conducting them for 15 years, and the results were always revealing. Some employees never reported the finding. Others reported it, but only after obvious hesitation or suspicion that cameras were recording them. A very few reported it immediately, without hesitation, as if the idea of keeping it had never occurred to them. Catherine Walsh was the first person in 5 years who had reported it within minutes of discovery, finished her work professionally, and made no apparent show of her honesty. The surveillance footage showed her momentary pause, natural human temptation, followed by immediate action. No drama, no performance for potential cameras, just quiet integrity. Richard found that fascinating. "I want to meet her," he told his regional manager, David Chun, that afternoon. "The housekeeper from this morning, Catherine Walsh." David pulled up her file, scanning it quickly. "She's been with us for 7 years. Perfect attendance, no complaints, works whatever shifts we need. Quiet, keeps to herself mostly. Is there a problem?" "No problem," Richard said. "I want to thank her personally for her honesty. Set up a meeting tomorrow morning before her shift." Catherine received the message with confusion and no small amount of anxiety. In her experience, being summoned to meet with management was rarely good news. She spent the evening convinced she had somehow done something wrong, mentally reviewing every room she cleaned that week, every interaction with guests and co-workers. The next morning, she arrived at the hotel an hour early, wearing the only professional outfit she still owned from her previous life, a simple navy dress that had survived a decade in the back of her closet. Her hand shook slightly as she entered the executive conference room, where she'd been told to wait. Richard Blackwood entered 5 minutes later, and Catherine stood automatically, the posture respecting grain from years of service work. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 50, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Mrs. Walsh, please sit down," he said warmly, taking the seat across from her rather than at the head of the table. "First, let me introduce myself properly. I'm Richard Blackwood. I own this hotel and about 40 others across the country." Catherine's anxiety spiked. Hotel owners didn't personally meet with housekeepers unless something was very wrong. "Sir, if I did something." "You did," Richard interrupted, but he was smiling. "You found a significant amount of money in one of my rooms yesterday. You reported it immediately and went back to work. I wanted to thank you personally for your integrity." Catherine blinked, processing this. That was just what anyone should do. "But not what everyone does," Richard said. "I've been conducting these tests for 15 years, Mrs. Walsh. Your response was exceptional, which makes me curious about you." He opened a folder. "Your file says you've been in housekeeping for 7 years. Before that..." Here it was, Catherine thought, the question she had been dreading, the one that required her to explain the gap, the disability, the failure to return to her former profession. She took a breath and decided on honesty. "Before that, I worked in finance. I was a senior analyst at Cornerstone Financial Group, specializing in portfolio management and risk assessment." Richard's eyebrows rose. "That's quite a change." "Yes, sir." Catherine's voice remained steady, though her hands gripped the edge of the table. 10 years ago, I had a stroke. I was 32, working late at the office, running on too much coffee and too little sleep. The stroke was severe. Partial paralysis, loss of speech. The doctor said I might never walk or talk again. She paused, the memory still sharp enough to cut. My husband, he tried to be supportive at first, but after 5 months of caring for someone who couldn't communicate, couldn't move without help, had 2 young children to manage, he left, told my parents I was their problem now, and disappeared. Richard said nothing, but his attention was absolute. "My parents were retired teachers," Catherine continued, "in their 60s, living on fixed income, suddenly responsible for their disabled daughter and 2 grandchildren. But they took us in. They fought for me, with me, every single day of rehabilitation. My mother would spend hours doing physical therapy exercises with me, refusing to let me give up. My father would read to me, talk to me, even when I couldn't respond, maintaining the certainty that I was still in there somewhere." "It took 6 years," she said, her voice thick with emotion. 6 years of physical therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy. But I learned to walk again, to talk again, to function independently. By the time I was 38, I was physically recovered. But professionally," she gestured at herself, at the housekeeping uniform she'd left in her locker. 6 years is a lifetime in finance. Technology had changed. Regulations had evolved. All my professional contacts had moved on. And honestly, who wants to hire someone with a massive gap in their resume caused by severe disability? The liability concerns alone. "So you took what job you could find," Richard said quietly. "My neighbor knew the housekeeping manager here. Put in a good word. I was grateful for any work that could help me contribute to my parents' household. Start saving for my daughter's futures." Catherine met his eyes directly. "It's honest work, Mr. Blackwood. I'm not ashamed of it. But yes, there are days when I'm cleaning bathrooms, and I remember when I was managing 8-figure portfolios." Richard was quiet for a long moment, studying her with that same intense attention. Then he asked, "If you could return to finance, would you?" The question caught Catherine off guard. I don't know if that's possible anymore. That's not what I asked. If it were possible, would you want to?" Catherine thought about it honestly. "Yes," she said finally. "I love that work. The analysis, the strategy, understanding market patterns and risk factors. I was good at it. But more than that, I want my daughters to see that setbacks don't define you, that you can fall as far as I fell and still find your way back." Richard nodded, as if she confirmed something he'd suspected. Mrs. Walsh, I'm opening a new property next month. Meridian Grand in downtown Chicago. It's our flagship hotel, the crown jewel of our expansion. I need a finance director for that property. Someone to manage budgets, analyze operational costs, optimize revenue streams, and report directly to corporate. Catherine stared at him, certain she misheard. The position requires someone with financial expertise, analytical skills, and uncompromising integrity, Richard continued. Someone who understands that how you handle small tests of character determines how you'll handle large responsibilities. Yesterday, you passed a test you didn't even know you were taking. Mr. Blackwood, I've been out of finance for nearly a decade. I don't have current certifications, updated software skills. Those can be learned, Richard interrupted. Character can't be taught. Work ethic can't be trained into someone who doesn't already have it. And integrity, he gestured at the folder between them. Integrity at your level is rare enough that I'm willing to invest in rebuilding your technical skills. He slid a document across the table. This is an offer. Salary is commensurate with the position, about 4 times what you're currently making. 6 months of intensive training and certification before you officially start. Full benefits, relocation assistance to Chicago if needed. I want you to consider it seriously. Catherine's hand shook as she looked at the numbers on the page. It was more than just a job offer. It was validation, recognition, a second chance she had stopped believing was possible. Why me? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. You could hire someone with an uninterrupted career, current experience. I could, Richard agreed. And I'd get someone who's never really been tested. Someone who's never had to fight their way back from absolute bottom. You know what adversity feels like, Mrs. Walsh. You know what it means to rebuild yourself from nothing. Those aren't just theoretical concepts to you. They're lived experience. That makes you invaluable. He stood, extending his hand. Think about it. Talk to your family. But Catherine, and I hope you don't mind me using your first name, don't let fear or self-doubt make this decision for you. You've already proven you can overcome impossible odds. This is just the next step. That evening, Catherine sat at her parents' kitchen table. The offer letter spread in front of her like a map to a country she'd given up hope of ever reaching. Her daughters, now teenagers, stood behind her, reading over her shoulder with growing excitement. Mom, this is amazing, her eldest Sarah said. You have to take it. Her mother, Eleanor, sat down beside her, taking her hand. Baby, you've earned this. More than earned it. Catherine looked at her father, Thomas, who had been quiet throughout the discussion. He met her eyes with that same steady gaze that had sustained her through 6 years of rehabilitation. You're scared, he said simply. Catherine nodded, tears threatening. What if I fail? What if I can't do it anymore? What if... Catherine Marie Walsh, her father interrupted with gentle firmness. 10 years ago, doctors told us you'd never walk again, never speak again, be dependent on care for the rest of your life. You proved them wrong through sheer determination and refusal to quit. This, he tapped the offer letter. This is nothing compared to what you've already conquered. But the girls, Catherine protested. Chicago is so far. I can't leave you and Mom to... We've already talked about it, Eleanor said. If you take this job, we're coming with you. The girls, too. Chicago has good schools. We'll find a place big enough for all of us, just like we've always done. We're a family, Catherine. We go together. Her younger daughter, Emma, hugged her from behind. Mom, you always tell us that hard things are worth doing, that giving up is easy, but getting up is what matters. Maybe you should listen to your own advice. Catherine laughed through her tears, overwhelmed by the support surrounding her. She thought about Richard Blackwood's words. Character can't be taught. She thought about the moment in room 1847 when she'd held $10,000 and chosen integrity over immediate relief. She thought about 6 years of fighting to reclaim her body, her speech, her independence. And she thought about the woman she used to be, the one who managed portfolios and made strategic decisions, the one who had been lost but never quite forgotten. Okay, she said quietly, then stronger. Okay, I'll do it. The 6 months of training that followed were intense. Richard hadn't exaggerated about the investment required to bring Catherine's skills up to current industry standards. She completed 3 certification programs, learned new software platforms, studied updated financial regulations, and worked with a mentor who had been Meridian CFO for 2 decades. There were moments when Catherine questioned whether she could really do this, when the learning curve felt impossibly steep, when years of self-doubt threatened to overwhelm her determination. But each time she faltered, she remembered that hotel room, that envelope of cash, that choice that had changed everything. Her daughters moved with her to Chicago, enrolled in excellent schools, and blossomed in a vibrant city. Her parents found a comfortable apartment in a neighborhood with other retirees, finally able to relax after years of providing for their expanded household. Catherine rented a modest place nearby, close enough for family dinners but independent enough to rebuild her sense of self-sufficiency. When the Meridian Grand opened in downtown Chicago, Catherine Walsh walked through the doors not as a housekeeper, but as the property's finance director. Her office overlooked Michigan Avenue, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the morning light. On her desk, she kept 2 items, a photo of her family and a small card with a simple reminder. Character is what you do when no one is watching. The work was challenging, sometimes overwhelming, but Catherine approached it with the same determination that had carried her through rehabilitation. She analyzed budgets, optimized operational costs, identified revenue opportunities, and presented strategic recommendations to corporate leadership. She worked long hours, but never at the expense of her health. She'd learned that lesson the hard way. 6 months into her tenure, Richard Blackwood visited the property for a quarterly review. He found Catherine in her office at 6 p.m., reviewing year-end projections. Working late, he observed from her doorway. Catherine looked up, smiling. Not too late. I've learned my limits. She gestured to her standing desk and the timer set for regular breaks. And I've learned to respect them. Richard entered, taking a seat across from her desk. How are you finding the position? Challenging, Catherine said honestly. There are still moments when I feel like I'm playing catch-up, like everyone else is a step ahead. But I'm managing. The team has been supportive, and the work itself, it feels like coming home. Your Q3 analysis was excellent, Richard said. You identified revenue opportunities our regional team had completely missed. Corporate was impressed. Thank you. That means a lot. Richard was quiet for a moment, then said, I want you to know something, Catherine. When I left that money in the hotel room, I was testing character. It was a simple binary test. Report it or don't. But what I found was much more than that. I found someone who had been tested by life in ways far more profound than anything I could artificially create, and who had passed every single one of those tests. He leaned forward. You want to know the real reason I hired you? It wasn't just the integrity, though that mattered. It was reading your file afterward and understanding that you were someone who had fought her way back from circumstances that would have destroyed most people. That told me everything I needed to know about your character, your resilience, and your determination. Catherine felt tears threatening, but held them back. That test in the hotel room changed my life. No, Richard corrected gently. Your choice in that hotel room changed your life. The test just gave you an opportunity to demonstrate who you already were. He stood, preparing to leave. By the way, I'm promoting you. Regional Finance Director, overseeing all Midwest properties. You'll still be based here, but with expanded responsibilities. The envelope in room 1847 had contained $10,000. But the real fortune, the one that couldn't be counted in cash, was a discovery that character, once truly forged, couldn't be destroyed by disability, abandonment, or years of humble work. It could only be revealed, tested, and ultimately proven. Catherine Walsh had been tested, and she had passed. So here's my question for you. You find $10,000. No cameras. No one would ever know. What do you honestly do? Be real in the comments. No judgment here. And tell us, what city are you watching from today?